The studio lights felt harsher than usual that afternoon, casting long shadows across the stage. Dr. Phil stood silently at the center, a thin manila folder tucked under his arm. He hadn't opened it yet. He hadn't even looked inside, but everyone in the room could feel it. Something about this case was different. The audience sensed it. The crew sensed it. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, as if unsure whether they should be rolling at all. "Before we begin," Dr. Phil said slowly, his voice calm but weighted, "I want everyone to understand that what we're dealing with today is not just a legal issue. It's not just about money, it's about truth. And once the truth comes out, there's no putting it back." No one spoke. Somewhere in the audience, a woman inhaled sharply and then covered her mouth, as if she'd realized she was holding her breath without knowing why. 6 months earlier, the Wilson family believed they were grieving in private. Harold Wilson had been a respected name in his community, a self-made businessman who started with a single hardware store and built it into a regional chain worth millions. He was known as a family man. Church on Sundays, barbecues on holidays. A man who shook hands firmly and looked you in the eye. When he died suddenly at 71 from a stroke, the story seemed simple. A good man gone too soon, leaving behind his wife of 48 years and their 2 adult children. Or so everyone thought. Margaret Wilson sat on the stage now, her posture stiff, hands folded tightly in her lap. She was 69, her hair carefully styled, her makeup flawless in a way that suggested control rather than vanity. She had been married to Harold since she was 21. He was her entire adult life. To her left sat her daughter, Emily, 41. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her jaw clenched as if she'd been holding back words for months. Emily was the one who had pushed for the show, the one who said they needed answers. Next to Emily sat her younger brother, Jason, 38. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, fingers interlaced. Unlike his sister, Jason hadn't wanted to be here. He'd said they should handle it privately. Lawyers, not cameras. Silence, not spectacle. Across from them sat a man none of them had grown up with. A man they barely knew. Daniel Reed, 45. He sat straight-backed, hands resting calmly on his thighs. He wore a plain navy jacket and no tie. His expression was composed, but his eyes gave him away. They moved constantly, taking in the room, the audience, the faces of the family he was connected to by blood, but not by memory. Dr. Phil turned slightly, gesturing toward him. "This family came here today because there's a dispute over Harold Wilson's estate," he said. Emily and Jason believed that their father's assets would be divided in a way that reflected what they'd always been told. But 3 weeks after the will was read, something happened that changed everything. Emily let out a humorless laugh. "Something happened," she repeated. "That's one way to put it." Dr. Phil looked at her. "Tell me." She swallowed hard. "My dad always said everything would be split evenly. He said it more than once, not just to us, to my kids, to friends. One day this will all be yours," he'd joke. So when the will was read and it wasn't, when it didn't say that, her voice cracked and she stopped, pressing her lips together. Jason reached out instinctively, touching her arm. She didn't pull away, but she didn't look at him either. "The will left the majority of the estate to one person," Dr. Phil said. He paused, and it wasn't Margaret, it wasn't Emily, and it wasn't Jason. A murmur rippled through the audience. Dr. Phil turned to Daniel. "Daniel, when did you find out who Harold Wilson really was to you?" Daniel exhaled slowly. "I found out when I was 17. Margaret's head snapped up. Her eyes widened just slightly, but enough that the camera caught it. Emily noticed. "Mom." Margaret didn't respond, Daniel continued. "My mother sat me down one night. She was crying. She said there was something she should have told me years ago but didn't know how. She told me my father wasn't the man who raised me, that my biological father was Harold Wilson." The room erupted. Emily shot to her feet. No, that's not true, that's not possible." Jason stood too, his face pale. "Dad would never." Dr. Phil raised a hand. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Sit down," he said. They did. Margaret stared straight ahead, her breathing shallow, her face drained of color. Dr. Phil looked at her carefully. "Mrs. Wilson, did you know?" For a moment it seemed like she might pretend not to hear him. Then her shoulders sagged, just slightly, as if something heavy had finally been set down. "Yes," she whispered. The word barely made it past her lips, but it hit the room like a bomb. Emily turned toward her mother slowly, as if afraid sudden movement might shatter her. "You knew?" Margaret nodded once. Tears pooled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "I found out 39 years ago," she said. Jason's voice was hoarse. "You knew our entire lives?" Margaret closed her eyes. "Yes." No one spoke. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Dr. Phil broke it gently. "How?" Margaret's hands began to tremble. "Harold told me. Not right away. We'd been married almost 10 years. Emily was 6. Jason was 3. He came home one night and said he couldn't live with it anymore." Her voice faltered, but she forced herself to continue. "He told me that before we were married, during a break, he had a relationship with a woman named Linda. It ended. He came back to me. We got married. And then, years later, she contacted him. She had a son." Emily shook her head slowly. "So you just accepted that?" Margaret looked at her daughter, pain etched deep into her face. "I didn't accept it. I broke. I screamed. I threw things. I told him to choose." The audience leaned forward as one. "I told him if he wanted to be part of that child's life, then he couldn't be part of ours," Margaret said. "I was young. I was scared. I had 2 children and a marriage I thought was perfect. I didn't want to lose it." Daniel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Dr. Phil asked, "And what did he choose?" Margaret's voice dropped to almost nothing. "He chose us." Emily felt something twist in her chest. Anger, yes, but something else too. Something colder. "So what, Mom?" she said. "He just forgot about him." "No," Daniel said quietly. All eyes turned to him. "He didn't forget me," Daniel continued. "He sent money, every month. Through a lawyer. He paid for my college, helped with my first house. He came to my graduation. He stood in the back where no one would see him." Emily's breath caught. "He was there." Daniel nodded. "I didn't even know who he was then. My mom just said he was a family friend. I figured it out later." Jason sat back down heavily, rubbing his face with both hands. "Jesus." Dr. Phil leaned forward. "Daniel, why did you come forward now?" Daniel hesitated. "Because he died, and because he left me everything." The studio exploded. Emily stood again, her voice shaking with fury. "Everything? You're saying you inherited everything?" Daniel shook his head. "Not everything, but most of it. The business, the properties, the majority of the liquid assets." Margaret let out a sob she'd been holding in for decades. Dr. Phil picked up the manila folder he'd been holding since the start of the show. "What the Wilson family didn't know," he said, "was that Harold Wilson rewrote his will 2 years before his death, and he included a letter." Emily stared at the folder like it might bite her. "He asked that it be read in front of all of you," Dr. Phil continued. "Together." Emily's voice was barely recognizable. "I don't want to hear it." Dr. Phil looked at her steadily. "I know." He opened the folder. The paper inside was thick, cream-colored. The handwriting was neat, deliberate. Familiar. Dr. Phil took a breath and began to read. "To my family, if you're hearing this, then I'm gone, and that means I ran out of time to do what I should have done a long time ago. Margaret, you were the love of my life. That's the truth. But loving you didn't erase the biggest mistake I ever made. And protecting our family came at a cost I pretended I wasn't paying. Emily, Jason, I want you to know that every good thing I ever did, I did trying to be worthy of being your father. But I failed you in one way that matters most. I lied. Not once. Every day." "Daniel," Dr. Phil's voice caught. Daniel lowered his head. "I watched you grow up from a distance. I knew your favorite sport. I knew when you broke your arm. I knew when you got married. I knew when you became a father. And every one of those moments reminded me that I chose comfort over courage. I cannot undo that. I can only take responsibility for it now. I am leaving the business to Daniel because it was built on years of silence and compromise, and I don't believe I deserve to pass it on without acknowledging where some of that success came from. This is not a reward, it is an apology. To Emily and Jason, I am leaving assets that will ensure you and your families are taken care of for the rest of your lives. But I understand that money is not what you feel was taken from you. Margaret, I am sorry I made you carry this secret alone. I am sorry I let my fear become your burden. I hope one day you can forgive me. I do not expect it. Harold." Dr. Phil folded the letter carefully. No one moved. Emily's entire body shook. He chose him, she said hollowly. In the end, he chose him. Daniel stood up slowly. That's not what this is, he said. I didn't ask for this. I didn't even know about the will until after he died. Emily rounded on him. So what? You expect us to just be okay with this? With you taking over our father's life? Jason finally spoke, his voice steady but raw. Emily, stop. She looked at him in disbelief. Stop. Jason turned to Daniel. Do you even want it? Daniel hesitated. Then he shook his head. I wanted my father. I wanted him to show up without hiding. I wanted him to say my name out loud. Silence again. Dr. Phil stood. He walked away from his chair and sat down on the edge of the stage, level with the family. I've been doing this a long time, he said quietly, and I've seen what secrets do. They don't disappear. They wait. He looked at Emily. You feel replaced. She nodded, tears streaming freely now. He looked at Jason. You feel like the ground just disappeared under you. Jason swallowed hard. Yeah, and you feel like you finally got acknowledged, but at the worst possible cost. Daniel's eyes filled. Yes, Dr. Phil turned to Margaret. And you've been living with a decision you made out of fear that shaped 4 lives. Margaret broke down completely. I thought I was protecting my family, she sobbed. I didn't know I was destroying it. What happened next wasn't planned. Emily stood up slowly and walked across the stage. She stopped in front of Daniel for a long moment. She said nothing. Then she spoke, her voice trembling. I hate this. I hate how it happened. I hate that he lied to us. She took a breath. But you didn't do this. Daniel looked up at her, stunned. You didn't ask to be born, she continued, and you didn't ask to be hidden. She sat down beside him. Jason joined them, standing just behind, resting a hand on both of their shoulders. The audience stood, not applauding, just witnessing. Dr. Phil didn't say anything. He didn't need to. When the cameras finally stopped, the family stayed. They talked. They cried. They argued. They listened. Months later, Daniel stepped back from the business. Emily and Jason helped run it. Margaret started therapy for the first time in her life. They weren't healed, but they were honest. And sometimes, that's where it begins.